Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to what is the basketball podcast that has not yet been named, but is so graciously hosted by Evan on his wonderful channel that he's built over the years. We decided we were going to do a preview for 7 basketball teams. We've got a few that have already been locked, loaded, and shot out of the gun. This one is in the chamber. We're headed on down to, or up to, or sideways to Portland. Okay, Evan, we have possible MVP candidate, the NBA's resident pick and roll expert. We have a big man with a jerry curl who is dressing super well and is finally healthy again. We have a Harry Giles on the end of the bench who's killing preseason. We've got an excellent shot creator in CJ McCollum, and we've got Robert Covington in the fold in Portland. What do you think of this team right off the bat?
Right away, if we're talking tiers, in the West, I have the Lakers in a tier of their own, their class of their own. Right underneath, I could see any of these teams losing in the first round or making the finals if things break right. Portland, Dallas, Denver, Utah, last but not least, the Clippers. Houston might be in there. Harden situation to be decided. So if we're talking Blazers, their North Star, yes, pun intended, Damian Lillard. If you're a fan of his music, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, check it out. Educate yourself. Could he have an MVP season? Absolutely. He is the biggest offensive threat this side of Steph Curry, I believe, with what he can do with spacing on the pick and roll and obviously logo range. Use of Nurkic, fantastic in the bubble. For my money, he was a top 5 center in the league. That might be crazy to say just because of how big and strong he is and how rugged a rim protector he is and how nimble he is. He can do so many things, and he is a sensational passer. So I don't know if top 5 is crazy to say, but I think his upside is unreal.
I think something that is exceptionally important is that Nurkic can have the ball at anywhere on the floor in a playoff game, and you trust him at any point in time. It could be 16 seconds left on the clock, down to he could have the ball, and you say Nurkic has to find a way to get that ball into the bucket or to a teammate who can create himself. You trust him in that position. Now, that doesn't mean you want him to have the ball. It just means if he's the release valve at any point in time, let's say Dame gets doubled, something like that, you trust him. That's the type of, confidence you have in a guy like that. Also, he is a remarkably good screener for Damian Lillard. He is, one half of what will probably be, by points per possession and by usage rate, the best duo in the pick and roll in the NBA for this season. How much of that is Dame? 85%, but Nurkic's 15% is important. Working off of that guy, CJ McCollum, another guy who brings danger in his own way, doesn't get to the free throw line like he should, and doesn't take as many threes as he should. His shot profile, despite being a talented shooter, is more mid-range heavy than you would like, but that makes him a dangerous release valve when teams are really keying up on Dame. It means that he can get to pretty much any spot on the floor and make a shot there. It's what we've seen from him in the playoffs. He's been a good release valve, if not a super affecting player the whole game over. In the pressure cooker, CJ is pretty good to have the ball in his hands. Now they bring in Robert Covington, who I think makes this team, of course Dame makes this team go, but Robert Covington makes this team the most interesting it's been in forever. This, I think, is the best rendition of Damian Lillard's Blazers that we've ever seen, which is cool because Dame seems right at the peak of his prime. Very rarely do you see a team build the best version of itself at the most opportune time. Would it be more opportune if the Lakers didn't rebuild so well in the offseason? Yes. But I love what the Blazers have done. Off the top of your head, ceiling, floor, what's the initial read on this team?
Would it surprise me if this team made the finals? No. Would it surprise me if this team lost in the first round? Also no. It's a cop-out, sure. But that's because they're in the West. Everything is so competitive, and you have to factor in health, COVID, everything like that. This season is going to be unlike any other season. And so who knows what things are going to be like. If Dame goes out for any amount of time, what does the team really look like? CJ can carry that mantle of lead ball handler, decision maker, pick and roll threat, not to the extent that Dame can, obviously. Very few can. But who backs him up? Point guard depth or ball handler depth is a big question mark if I'm looking at the Blazers. So it depends who they end up matched up against. If it's a favorable matchup, hey man, like I keep saying, I could see them in the finals. If it's not out in the first round, wouldn't be that surprising to me. That's just how the West is. It's a bloodbath.
I think I feel the exact same way as you. It's matchups. If Dame gets an opportunity to kill a team that drops in the pick and roll, like if they play the Jazz and the Jazz I said this in another podcast, but if the Jazz have a good season and they have even if they're a higher seed, whatever it ends up being, and they have to guard Damian Lillard in the pick and roll, he might torch them because Jamal Murray torched them, and Dame, believe it or not, is actually probably better than Jamal Murray and is more capable of getting his own shots than Jamal Murray. So, high ceiling team, especially with Dame's shot making that can go nuts. Robert Covington defensively, I think, adds a layer of dependability to the wing that they have not had, and his willingness to shoot the three next to Dame, very important. I'm excited to see what Covington brings this year. Rotating around that, you have your big three, even though Nurkic and McCollum typically would fall short of what we'd consider a big part of a big three. They're not typical stars in the league, but they're big three. Rotating around that, Cov, obviously. They started Derek Jones Jr. at the power forward spot in their last preseason game. So Derek Jones Jr., Gary Trent Jr., Harry Giles received a lot of playing time as well. And then you have guys like Melo, Enes Kanter, Rodney Hood, Nasir Little, Anthony Simons, or Simmons. I can't remember which one it is for him. But of those guys, who stands out to you? Who do you think represents high ceiling? Who do you think's the safe bets to play? And what would you rather see happen for the Blazers from those guys?
Safe bets to play for me, Trent Jr., his shooting, his spacing, his tenacity on defense. I could see him being the other guard if Dame or CJ sits. And that's really all if Simons, I believe that's how it's pronounced. I would trust you more than me on that one, but I don't know. So Simons and Little are guys who could, if they put it together, could they be rotation guys? Could they be important? Yes. Do I see that as of right now? No. So you're talking about more of wing-ish front court players and playing them. And so I will talk about this more in Coach's Corner. This might be crazy to me, and this might just be Derek Jones Jr., but if I'm Portland, I'm watching a lot of Miami film and trying to see if that Miami zone with those two long, aggressive wings up top and your guards in the back, your weaker, smaller guys, if that is a viable option for me. Because Dame and CJ are the only guys I trust with the ball as guards. Nurkic, yeah, if he gets the ball in the high post, on the slot, anywhere like that, he can be very effective, especially as a passer. You can play off of him. But if you're receiving ball pressure, things like that, you need that one guy out there. And so especially through this sprint of a season, I would love for them to conserve energy in this way. Because if you put a Derrick Jones Jr. or Robert Covington, Rodney Hood, just about anybody else big and long up top, and then you can hide Dame in one of the corners, or you can hide CJ, and you have Gary Trent on the other side. You're not losing that much with Gary Trent. It can be a way for them to be able to play Enes Kanter more, because Enes Kanter is a more effective offensive player than he is a defensive player. He's a rock solid rebounder, and that will bring you some value in the zone. So if that's crazy, yeah, it might be crazy, but that's a way I think they could maximize minutes where you rest Dame or CJ and you can only play one of those guards.
I think that's really interesting. I love that idea. A. B, I think you touch on one of the most important coaching aspects of this team, the staggering of ball handlers. Is Rodney Hood a guy who's going to get any time as a solo ball handler? Maybe, because they're short on depth. Is that ideal? Probably not. No. Anthony Simons, he's going into another year in the NBA. He's young. Guys progress fast at that age. Is he progressing defensively especially, but also offensively to a level where you're not going to be kind of biting your lip or your cheek when he's on the court? Not super sure. There's a lot of pop to his game, but there's a lot of stuff that you do not like when he's on the floor. So the proper staggering of Dame, of CJ, what lineups you're using for each of them. I love that you bring up them being able to use Kanter, especially his rebounding, not just a guy who boxes out, but a guy who hunts rebounds, which is so important in his zone. He's not looking for a guy. He's going to go get the ball. Very important to close out defensive possessions in his zone. And if they do that well, and this isn't a guarantee that happens, obviously, but that's an interesting look. I like that a lot. Rounding out those guys, Derrick Jones Jr., if they go small at the four like that, and they just want long athlete, Cov and Derrick Jones basically play the same position. They're the swingmen. Cov can bang a little bit more. He's obviously an incredible coverage defender. Derrick Jones Jr. maybe is a little bit more viable on ball. It really depends. It depends on how they're using him. Depends on especially how often he's targeted in pick and roll. I think that's really interesting. So we see this team as a team that can go really far or could come up short. When we think of them and we say, okay, if they come up short, what do you think is going wrong for this team?
A lack of ball handling, a lack of depth. Because if we're talking about it, we can't just talk about it from an injury standpoint. Health permitting, they're good, knock on wood. Foul trouble, right? If I'm an opposing coach and I got these long guys, I'm hunting CJ McCollum in the pick and roll. I am trying to get him out of the game by any means necessary. Get him in foul trouble. Get Damon, that stuff. So when those ball handlers, if for some reason both of them are out of the game, what does this team look like? Because you're looking at a mess of front court players. We talked about Nurkic can play out of anywhere. You can build your offense around him, but and this might be the coach in me, if I don't see Dame or CJ out there, I'm harassing the hell out of whoever's bringing the ball up. I'm making sure they don't get into their stuff. So I don't know. I honestly can't imagine what this team would look like if both of them were sitting, or if for some reason one of them was out and the other was sitting.
Yeah, I think you harass the ball handler, you overload on Nurkic while trusting your guys to recover to whoever else is on the floor. You find one of those guys there that you can kind of play off of a bit. You overload on Nurkic. You don't let them start their set until 13 seconds on the shot clock or 12. It can get kind of hairy, like really quickly. That'll be interesting to see. That represents their floor, I think. Their ceiling, we talked about it. They ride with Dame. Any of the tertiary guys like Hood, Melo, Do you find any interesting anecdotes or tidbits about their game, how they might fit in this year?
So I'm not sure if we mentioned Zach Collins, but when Zach comes back from injury, I think he will allow them to do a little bit more. I think he's a little overrated as a shooter. But in terms of a floor spacer, I think if teams are scared of him shooting it, then you can play off of that. But I think a pairing of Derrick Jones Jr. as a rim runner, as your four, really, and Zach Collins as your five who can space the floor, that's a great pairing. And I think that if Zach Collins' shot has developed, or it's further along than it was when we last saw him, then that gives you a lot more options to play with in the front court. You can play Nurk, and you can play Nurk with just about anybody, but you can play Nurk and Collins or Cantor or Giles. He gives you so much flexibility because I did a video about Robert Covington's defense. At this point, he's a much better rim protector and a backline eraser of mistakes than he is an on-ball guy, to your point. But he can also, if you need him to, he can play the five. I don't see them doing that because of the fives they have. But if you have a guy like that, you could find more time for Melo. Melo is the guy who I think his minutes will start to dwindle as the rotations start to get tighter. If he can learn to be or prove to be an effective burst in minutes guy off the bench, that's, I think, the best role for him. As far as Rodney Hood goes, ball handler, wing guy, could he be the answer if Dame and CJ are out? Yes. Do I trust that? No.
The Melo point, I think, is an interesting one, especially if he's playing with Nurkic when they don't have that much shot creation. If you say, like, Melo, you're going to play 8 to 10 minutes, you're going to get up shots. And that's kind of your role because we're going to try and stay afloat. You're going to keep us afloat sometimes. Other times it's not going to drop in, but the roster construction dictates that this is what's going to happen. Then, as you say, as things tighten up, as they identify more of what they like to do with the roster, they'll be less reliant on just handing a guy the ball and saying, you got to get shots up. Whether that means they've found different ways to utilize one of Simons, Hood, one of Giles or Collins, because Giles and Collins both brimming with a lot of high-level NBA skills, just super inconsistent careers so far. Odds are one of those guys pops off this year. I don't know who it's going to be. Giles has looked incredible in his preseason games. I wanted Giles so bad for the Raptors. It is what it is. But if I were a betting man, which I'm not, but if I were, and there were some sort of thing I could put money down that one of those guys is going to have a very good year, one of the two, I'd put money down on it. I think that's another aspect of their ceiling that we'll see progress over this year. And I'm excited to see it. Now, this team, this is a very easy answer, but as we've done with every other episode, every other team, this team has a vibe. Their noise comes from the locker room, comes from the team. We've seen it from other organizations. Noise can be good, noise can be bad. You can feel the good vibes washing over you from the Spurs when they're all playing StarCraft together in the finals, and it's wholesome and lovable, and they go on and win, and they just dominate on the floor. That's good. Bad kind of noise. The Clippers of last year, screaming, clenched fists, hand wringing, all bad. Not good stuff. The Blazers have noise. The noise is controlled and played through music via an aux cord. Now, it just so happens that the NBA's most famous rapper plays for the Blazers. That's my answer. I think Dame has the aux cord, and the Blazers go as he goes. This might be the easiest one we've done.
No doubt, no doubt. The thing about Dame also is he's the culture setter. He is their gold standard. There are stories about him texting end of bench guys saying, stay ready, we'll need you. He keeps guys engaged. He keeps guys involved. And if somebody is going to be complaining about playing time, things like that, Dame as their best player will straight up go up to them, according to articles and podcasts, and just be like, hey, we don't do that here, you know? So he sets the tone. If your franchise guy, if your best guy is doing stuff like that and he doesn't allow little stuff to linger, there's no doubt who the aux cord holder is.
And what song is he playing? If you could choose, what is the song? You told people to educate themselves earlier if they don't listen to his music. That seems to indicate that you are very well versed in Damian Lillard music. So which of his songs best exemplifies this team?
I'll say this. Just this is the craziest thing. I don't think I've told anybody, but Damian Lillard, when the letter O came out, I set his highlight video to, well, I didn't make it to that, but it was playing in the background as I was putting that together. That was the first time I've ever had an NBA player whose highlights I was going through and music was playing in the background to go at the same time. Off the top of my head, like, I play home team a lot. It's just something that I've just had it on a bunch. I don't know if that fits this team, but it's the only one I have in my head right now.
Good. Okay. Now, as we all know, you, the viewer or listener, whatever it is, myself, Evan has crafted this channel over some years, a channel you appreciate, a channel I appreciate, a channel he's proud of. And he's done this because of his basketball intelligence, his ability to recognize things on the floor. I decided to say, Evan, I'd like you to do that for every team we cover so that people can see what you're seeing, what you're picking up. So you did, and it's called Coach's Corner. What are you talking about today?
I did more than tease it earlier. I outright talked about it. But for the first time, I wasn't really looking at the team from last year. I watched the team from last year. They were okay without Nurkic. With Nurkic, defensively, I don't think they were that great. I think they were, in fairness to them, by the end of the bubble, come playoff time, they were worn out. They were trying to get to the playoffs. They got there, but they had nothing left when they got there. So what I thought I would do is think about how they could change their defensive scheme, what they could do to buy minutes for Dame or CJ or Nurk, just so they're not wiped out come crunch time. So what I settled on is the zone, and I will list the reasons why. So enjoy.
This is something unusual that Eric Spoelstra does. He puts his forwards in the top of the 2-3.
Why show Miami Heat zone film while talking about the Portland Trailblazers? Well, I think it could be a potential key to the Blazers' success. See, in the 2011 finals, Rick Carlisle pretty much shut down LeBron and the Miami Heat with the zone. Also on that coaching staff was Terry Stotts. Now, the Miami Heat deployed their two big athletic guys up top and guards in the corners to help hide them, and I think that's something that the Blazers could really benefit from. As you see Derrick Jones Jr. pick off the inbound here, you think about his great length, you think about Robert Covington. Those two guys bring a lot of size that the Blazers were lacking and a lot of energy, especially defensively. Now, these clips are going to roll, and they're sort of to show you it's not from a lack of want or trying that Dame and CJ don't really get recognized as good defenders. It's because teams go at them. So CJ here, great hands. Dame, he can get after you defensively, blocks Jason Tatum's jumper, and then hustles to try and save the ball. It's not because they don't want to play defense. I think they just need something that will help maximize what they already do and make the most of their incredible effort. As you see Dame strip the ball here and just get laid out.
Wawu Cabarro gets the loose ball. Gets it off to LeVert. Hounded. Oh, what a defensive play by Lillard. He stole the ball.
Gary Trent Jr. is another guy who could benefit. He has solid hands. He's an active defender, tenacious, but allowing him to conserve a little bit more of that energy to allow him to go after the big wing matchups he will be asked to take on, I think will be, again, a really great benefit. And use of Nurkic and a guy like Enes Kanter, these are bigs. Nurkic especially is very nimble and is a great rim protector, but it will help maximize Enes Kanter also, because if he's in the heart of that zone, he hunts rebounds and he can go after it, and like Nurkic here, he can go vertical. Last but not least, Robert Covington is the guy they brought in. He's not necessarily the best on-ball guy, but he is tremendous if he is your last line defender. If he is your guy who's rotating over and deterring shots at the rim, he'll do more than deter shots, actually. He will erase shots. Dwight Howard here, he can get after guys in a way that a 6'7" guy should really not be able to.
He comes up short. McGee is...
Clark's back in. Gobert down the baseline from the dunk.
One possession game approaching the 3-minute mark. Gallinari with a cut, had a block.
23. 5 minutes to go in this third quarter. Harold.
Austin Rivers too strong. Rozier. Oh my goodness.
Wow. Look how much you learned. Look how much I learned. Thank you, Evan, for gracing us with that Coach's Corner. Okay, now, the final aspect of this podcast, and one that is, I think, my favorite segment aside from Coach's Corner. It's just fun to talk about what is a team at their best and get a little bit more into the details. And that is their best lineup, because at the very least, you got to play 5 guys. What is the best mix of 5 guys that creates the best on-court results? So we've come together and decided the same thing. And just as a disclaimer, this isn't a lineup that is guaranteed to get a lot of minutes. We think it'll get a decent amount of minutes from Stotts, and we think it'll win those minutes. Now, it doesn't have to end up being the very best lineup. It's just what we think. Now, I'll throw the graphic up right now, but you have Yusuf Nurkic at the 5, Robert Covington at the 4, Gary Trent Jr. at the 3, CJ McCollum at the 2, and Damian Lillard at the 1. Bounce it off of Evan. Your initial thoughts when you think of that lineup. What are they doing good? What are their shortcomings? Why are they going to win their minutes, basically?
If you think about the Blazers last year, what they lack is a guy who can defend big wings and make up for the defensive shortcomings of their wing players. Because Gary Trent can press up on his guy as much as he wants. But if CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard are out there with him, I'm not saying they don't give great effort. I'm not saying they don't care about that end. They do. But they can't bring it in a way that you would need them to for them to be a true, you're a lock to make the finals. Robert Covington is a big wing. I'll say that. He is not the on-ball guy that you want him to be. Maybe Derek Jones Jr. could be that. Maybe Gary Trent could be that. But what Robert Covington is an elite mistake eraser. He will clean up stuff on that back line. He'll communicate with you. We'll have some clips going. I posted a full 9-minute video of it, but he brings you enough defensively that you're going to be a plus on offense. There's no doubt about that. But he's also a good enough floor spacer. He's good enough that he's a threat, and they have to respect his shooting.
I think that's the perfect thing, is that you get this lineup automatically. What comes to mind for me is spread pick and roll. Spread pick and roll, spread pick and roll, spread pick and roll. Run it, run it, run it. If they overload on defense, CJ McCollum, that secondary action that it flows into, he can pass, he can shoot it, he'll make a decent decision, and that with how much, offensive output Dame is going to bring, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. They're going to score you're doing a lot of relying on the latter three of the lineup, Trent Jr., Nurkic, and Covington, to make sure that the soft point of attack defense that Dame and CJ will be bringing is not going to be an absolute detriment to your team, which is why, as you say, having an elite mistake eraser, as Robert Covington is, that's meaningful. That's very big for that team. This is not a complicated version of a best lineup. I think of the teams we talked about playing their best lineups, this is one of the most obvious. This is one I think Stotts will put a lot of time into, and I expect the results to come back very quickly, and they'll be positive. I'm very excited to see this team because, as I said at the top, I think this is the best they've done building around Dame, and better yet, they have a really, really fun 5-man lineup that you'll be able to watch likely at the end of games and just throughout the season. And they should make it rain from downtown, and they should make smart passes, and you should see some elite recoveries from Nurkic and Covington. It's all I could ask for from this team, basically.
Absolutely. Dame is a known quantity offensively. CJ is a guy who, if he can attack second side, he is feasting on a shifted defense. Nurk, we talked about a bunch. If it's a different big there because of foul trouble, that's still manageable because you have Covington there. A favorite term of yours, he's a lurker. And this is a term I learned from you, actually. Heavy hands. He's stripping the ball if you have it loose anywhere. So the only thing I can really think of to make that team really suffer is a big wing, Kawhi, Luka. But those are problems every team has.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, is that a team that is uniquely built to give the Trailblazers trouble is that Nurkic is probably going to play quite a bit of drop. And Covington I'm not sure if they put Derrick Jones Jr. or Covington or Hood or whoever on a LeBron, a Kawhi, a Luka, but none of the guys on the roster are equipped to guard those guys. But the thing is, as you said, very few teams actually are equipped to guard those guys. There's like 6 teams that possess a guy who's actually going to play defense like that. The OG Anunobis, Royce O'Neals, those types of players. I know you probably like that pull with the Royce O'Neal comment, but they have weaknesses, as every team does. But man, these Blazers don't have nearly as many weaknesses as a lot of other teams. And they have Dame time. A little bit of time to appreciate Dame. Do you have any final comments on the Blazers and Damian Lillard?
They're so good, man. They're so good. Dame works so hard. The atmosphere he creates. Listen, as a coach, you want that guy in your locker room who just, if he can kill all the little stuff before it becomes big stuff, that does wonders for you. You can try to have a guy be that. But if they're not that, organically, if they don't have that in them, it's just not there. And that does so much for your team. So this is a team, I think about the 2010 Suns, who they're going to come together. They have the ability to overachieve because of their chemistry, their camaraderie, and having a guy like Dame as your leader.
That's a great comparison. I'm a huge fan, big fan of that. But Evan, that feels like it for the Blazers. How do you feel?
I feel good, man. I feel like Dame set the tone for this pod, and we were quick, efficient, and I took some shots from deep. I did.
Zone defense type of shot from deep. Yeah. Okay, listener, if you want to subscribe, if you aren't already, comment below what you thought of the podcast, if there's certain things you like. And compliments are always very, very acceptable, as is constructive criticism for either myself or for Evan. Evan, I'm ready to go. You have any last words to say?
Yes. Yes, I do. If you watch the other ones, you know what's happening. Samson Folk plug right here. I will have his social, a link to his stuff at Raptors Republic, and a link to his weekly basketball newsletter. I've talked about this before. It truly elevated my bubble basketball watching experience. And can I say that about a lot of writers? No. Am I doing that because he's here? Yeah, maybe, kind of. But I really do enjoy his stuff. He's a good friend and a great writer.
Thank you, Evan. For me, that's it. I think we're ready to get out of here. If you're a Blazers fan and you like the episode, I'm glad. If you just like basketball, want to hear us talk about Dame, right on. That's the type of fan I am too. Let's get out of here. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.